Good morning, everybody. Bo here. This is Football Talk and, of course, your Blue Friday edition of Hawk Talk. Thanks for the ones that reached out to me last week when they noticed my show wasn't on. I was feeling under the weather, so I appreciate you guys reaching out there on Twitter. Love you guys. That's awesome. But mostly, I just didn't really have my voice. It sidelined me for the last week. It's still a little bit off. But that being said, thanks again for checking in. That was awesome. But here we are, and we got plenty to talk about. Obviously, there is rumors that or thoughts that they're still going to go after a quarterback, even signing Geno, and I do believe that that is the case. One of the questions that came through was I surprised at how many people they sent to the Ohio State Pro Day to take a look at Stroud? And in a way, I was surprised. It's very rare for the Hawks to send that many people, right? They sent 8 people to go on that evaluation. 7 of the 8 were on the offensive side, so it's not even like they were necessarily looking at other talent. So I was a little bit surprised by that, only because the Panthers have the first overall pick. They seem to have a ton of interest in Stroud. So although Stroud did put out that his favorite team is the Seahawks, and maybe they did that for that reason, at the end of the day, he's not going to still be on the board at 5. And the odds of them going up to get him at 1, again, with a Panthers team that already moved up to get that number 1 spot, seems like a 0 chance. And just, even if they decided to go a different route and they decided to go with Young instead of Stroud, there's still no way that the Texans or the Colts don't pick him up. Obviously, the Cardinals sitting at 3, they're not really looking for a quarterback. They're probably going to take Will Anderson at 3. So don't really have to worry about them. But that means sitting at 5, the Hawks have a real shot at either Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. I know they have a lot of interest in Richardson. So I think with the prospect of Richardson, the Seahawks are actually a really good fit for that kid. He isn't ready to play, right? He has a ton of upside, or potential upside anyway. So if he could sit behind a veteran, I think that would help him immensely. I don't know that he's going to have a great deal of success if they just run him out there week 1, like would happen if he went to the Colts. So for his sake, I kind of hope he ends up with the Seahawks, just because I think it'll be a much better situation for Anthony Richardson than, again, saying he has to go out week 1 and produce. Again, athletically, he is amazing. He is basically a more athletic version of a Cam Newton that can throw a little bit better, but he still has accuracy issues. And I believe that if he can sit behind a veteran like a Geno Smith, who is, very accurate, I think he can get brought along in that way. So, hey, what's up, Mitch? Next shift, good to see you guys. But yeah, I think if you bring him along in that way, he will have a much better career path than if, you got, if you're just headed out week 1 to hope for the best. Whereas a guy like CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, they are a much more polished passer. So if they're asked to go out and play week 1, I feel like they will have a much better chance of, producing what it is you want in that scenario. But so anyway, that's kind of my thought on that. Good question, though. It's very rare for the Seahawks to send 8 guys out to a pro day, especially when 7 of the 8 were on the offensive side of the ball. So they obviously weren't looking at defensive talent. So I was a little bit surprised by that. All right. Sign-in of safety Julian Love from the Giants. That was a great move. They needed some help back there, mostly because, they seem to be getting hurt. And so that safety position needs a little bit of depth. Obviously, he fit their system well. So that was a great acquisition from the Hawks. It's actually kind of impressive how much the Seahawks have done in this free agency period, because historically they really just don't do a lot. They usually sit back, and as a fan, you're sitting there like, man, can we do anything? Now, obviously, they like to build through the draft, but sometimes it'd be nice to, bring in a piece works. Now, last year's draft obviously was a home run, so you really can't feel bad about that. They ended up with 6 rookies that all started and were major contributors. 2 of them were in the running for respective offensive and defensive rookie of the years. So, I mean, you can't be mad at the process, but sometimes just as a fan, you get a little bit impatient and you really want something positive during the free agency period. And in this free agency, they've actually done a lot. The first day of free agency, they went out and got a defensive tackle and a defensive end. They released some guys that weren't really huge producers, especially on the defensive side of the ball, since that was such a struggle, stopping the run. They did okay actually in attacking the pass, but against the run, the defensive line and that linebacking core, man, they just got ran over all year. They gave up ridiculous numbers in the rushing game. If you were running any kind of slant or, over the middle dig route, anything through their seam routes, they would get barbecued all game. So it was nice to see them go out and immediately get some pieces to help shore those positions up. So that was nice to see an immediate plan of action to get the team better as soon as free agency hit. Now, one of the questions I've been asked over the last 2 weeks a ton is why we haven't signed Bobby Wagner yet. And the biggest thing with that is cap space. So we got all of these signings. I think there's 6 or 7 free agent signings over the last week, and you got to pay all those guys. So as it sits right now, I think there's still 2 contracts that have to be signed with some of the free agents that they brought in. And with those being signed, that drops available cap space down to $5 million. And that's ahead of the draft, where if they draft in their positions that they currently have, that works out to be, I want to say it's $8.5-9 million. And then with the other 2 contracts that still have yet to be signed, that's actually going to put them about $10 million over the cap space. So they're going to have to get rid of a couple of players probably anyway to get back under the cap. And that's without trying to sign Wagner. So even if you were to try and give him anything that he might want to come to the team for, there's just not the cap space for it. And so as much as he is a stud and would be an absolute anchor for this defense and really a necessary one, at the end of the day, the salary cap exists. And so you don't always get to be able to bring in all of the players that you want, which is probably why you saw on Twitter, for example, Bobby Wagner's background went from a beautiful shot of the Seattle skyline to it's currently dice. So it makes me think that he's probably changed his view a little bit towards Vegas, right? He's probably looking at the Raiders. Obviously, he would be a great addition to that team. I mean, he would be a great addition to anybody's linebacking core. He doesn't seem to have any decline in ability. And on top of it, he's an absolute general of your linebacking core. So he can direct traffic like nobody else. Super high football IQ, extremely athletic, is always one of the top tacklers in the league. So any team that can pick him up should. It just comes down to everybody is battling with the drop in the cap. And so unfortunately, there's some guys, some high-level guys that are still yet to be on rosters. And at the end of the day, it's just because nobody has room. Not that they wouldn't want them on their team. So it got asked about Penny. It was great to see Penny get a chance over at the Eagles. I felt bad for that guy. He just has never been healthy. And it's great that someone has given him a shot. Obviously, through his years in Seattle, He didn't play an entire full season any of the years he was there. His last 3 years, he had 18 starts combined, so that doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. So you knew that Seattle was moving on from Penny at this point. But what you didn't know is if any team was going to give him a shot just based on the injury history. And, so it was great to see the Eagles give him a shot. I think he'll actually be a really good fit there. They have a good offensive line. He won't be the main back. So as a change of pace back, I think he will be fantastic. Hopefully it'll extend his career a bit. Because again, super nice guy, amazing athlete, just happens to not be the most durable back. And at a position that you got to be probably one of the more durable athletes to be able to stay on the field, he just kind of wasn't. And so although I'm glad to see him move on from Seattle, it's awesome that he caught on with another team. And I think that's actually going to be a better situation for him than, was presented in Seattle. Seattle definitely likes a more hard-hitting, in-your-face kind of running back. And, for whatever reason, just durability-wise, he was not built for that. He needs some big holes to be able to run through. So great to see him get caught up over there. Do I think that Will Anderson will be available at 5? I doubt it. I really doubt it. Only because Arizona has a desperate need at that position. So with J.J. Watt retiring, and of course, they lost a guy, forgetting his name offhand. Denver picked him up. So that defensive line position, they need some real help at. So Will Anderson is obviously the exact guy they need. And of course, the guy is an amazing athlete. So if you can go directly from a J.J. Watt to a Will Anderson, I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better than that. So no, to answer that question, there's no way that he's there till 5. And I don't think, if you were assuming that the Seahawks were going to take somebody at 5, I really don't think they take Jalen Carter either. Obviously, Carter had some off the field stuff that, is a little bit of an issue, right? And the biggest thing is then he went from the combine to the pro day, and he ended up, between that time, which wasn't a ton of time, he ended up being 9 pounds overweight and physically unable to complete all of the drills on the pro day. So I would imagine that that's going to have him slide down the board. Now, granted, this is going to take somebody's going to take a shot on him. The guy's athletic ability is amazing, and hopefully they can get him on track. There may be something like the Eddie Lacy contract where there is some fitness goals that are requirements to hit certain dollar figures or whatever. Now, I don't know what that looks like with a rookie contract, but I feel like there's probably something in there that they can kind of finesse into that contract to make that work. Excuse me. But so I don't think they would take Jalen Carter at 5 either. I think that because of what transpired over the last, few weeks, 5 would actually be a reach for him, when I believe he will still be on the board in the second round. And again, only because now there's some real questions on his work ethic as far as, if he's going to be mentally ready to play in the NFL. And so not that it takes a lot to make a guy slide on people's draft boards, but that is a huge one when you go from a guy that looks like he's ready to go to you can't complete drills. It doesn't inspire confidence with your front office. So I would bet that Jalen Carter is still on the board in the second round. And if he does end up as a Seahawk, that is probably where they pick him up, since they have a couple of second round picks. But I don't see them picking him up in the first round when there's other, defensive line talent in the draft. There's actually quite a bit of it. So as much as he was a rock star on the field, the last few weeks, I would bet probably slides him out of the first round. What do I think of the Drew Lock signing? I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't bring him back. He knows the system. The guys seem to like him. He isn't expensive. He everything I've ever seen about him, he looks like he's a ton of fun to be around. So that's a kind of guy you would like to have on your team. So bringing him back made total sense, especially since coming into this year, they're going to allow you to have an extra quarterback. So they can have Geno, they can have Locke, they can still draft a guy. So I like that dynamic. And again, he's a cheaper backup that has a year in the system. The guys seem to like him. I don't know why you wouldn't bring him back at that point. Do I like Jarran Reed coming back? Of course. He was a Seahawk before. So, again, he's going to fit into the system well. Granted, he was here when it was a 4-3 defense instead of a 3-4. Personally, I'm not a huge 3-4 defense fan, but since they kind of designed that with Jamal Adams in mind, and Jamal Adams looks to be going to be able to play at the beginning of the season. So hopefully they'll be able to use that defense the way that it was designed to be. Naturally, they had the 3-4 this last year. Adams gets hurt week 1. They didn't have anybody, he's listed as a safety, but they really use him as an outside linebacker essentially. And as a roaming linebacker, really. But that being said, they never really made an adjustment with him being gone, and they didn't have anybody athletic enough to take that position over. So it really hurt that defense because you don't have that speed where he could rush or he could help cover the middle of the field. Because, let's be honest, he's not a very highly graded coverage safety. He's mid-low, in the NFL when it comes to coverage as a safety. But if you're running a 3-4 and you're essentially using him as a third safety / outside linebacker type guy, then you can scheme with him in ways that make sense on your team that on paper may not necessarily make sense as a safety. But, again, in theory, he should be back. Hopefully he can stay healthy. I feel like if he gets hurt again this season, they will probably use the opt-out on his contract at the end of this year, this coming season. Because coming into this one, I got asked a bunch of times if they should try and move on from him. And the dead cap hit was just way too much. Plus, they gave up so much to go get him to the Jets. They gave away a couple of first-round picks. And so I feel like they had to give him at least one more year just to, kind of make sure that they made the right move or didn't, right? I mean, because at this point, I think it would have cost them $13 million to get off him as dead cap. And so if you're going to spend that anyway, you might as well keep him on the team. Again, the dude is an amazing athlete, so it can at least get him half of the year. I think it would be worth it to keep him. But again, who knows? It was before halftime in the first game this last season. So really who knows if he'll be there. Let's see. What do I think about the Evan Brown signing? Evan Brown's a center. We needed one. The interior of that offensive line really struggled to produce running lanes. So that one, I think, is going to be a huge help. I believe they also signed a guard. I don't have that written down, but I thought they did. But the tackles are set, right? Those two rookies, they came in, they played out of their mind. Awesome pickup. The interior of the offensive line, although they did really well in pass protection, they were absolutely terrible in producing rushing lanes. And that's, part of the reason why you ended up with Walker having all those games where they didn't really produce much in the running game, because it's hard to really get any positive yardage if you're getting hit behind the line of scrimmage all the time. If you're getting hit at the line of scrimmage, at least you can fall forward for one or two. When you're getting hit just after taking the handoff, I mean, your hope is to rush 3 yards and get to the line of scrimmage. So it's also why you ended up with so many scenarios where the Hawks were, 2nd and 14 or 3rd and 15. And I mean, let's be honest, there's not a ton in the playbook for 3rd and a mile. At that point, you're just hucking it up and hoping for the best. And that's not really the way this team's designed. Especially when you look at, guys like DK who can make a crazy catch, but then will for some reason drop an easy one. And of course, one of the other questions I get a lot is, what do I think about DK? And as an athlete, the dude is an absolute stud, a guy you want on his team. He's fast, he's big, he can catch anywhere in the range. It just happens that he seems like he loses a little bit of concentration if it's right on him. He's dropped a ton of those. And the other one that I think my biggest issue with DK is he is prone to that 15-yard unsportsmanlike, penalty every game. Like some corner gets in his head every game. And that's cool if you run hot and you want to battle or whatever, but he needs to learn how to stop at the end of a play. He likes to get a little chippy and, shove a little bit. And the NFL, the refs don't play with that at all. They'll throw laundry on the field all day. And, getting those 15-yarders, regardless of a 15-yard penalty, 15-yard penalties are drive killers most of the time. And so he also seems to get them at kind of inopportune times, but there's never really a good time to get a 15-yarder. So, you can't really protect the guy in that way. But, that's my biggest issue with DK is he just absolutely gets these unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. It's almost every game, absolute drive killers. And then, he'll make a spectacular catch and you're like, okay, he's that guy. Awesome. And then he'll have a little dig route that will hit him in the chest and he'll drop it. So it's going to be interesting, not this year, but I forget where his contract comes. I think it's 2 years from now, but it'll be interesting to see as he gets closer to the end of his contract, what it is they want to do. Cause I don't see him getting slower. The guy works on his body all the time. It's just going to be, can he evolve away from making those mistakes? Cause if he doesn't, then I think that they would end up moving on from him or trading him away. So that'll be an interesting situation to watch for sure. Let's see. Bear with me for a second. I lost my spot. Do I think they're going to trade down from 5? So I don't. That 5th pick, it's a spot where they really haven't had a lot of experience. Schneider and Carroll have had one other top 10 pick, and that's when they first got to Seattle. And beyond that, they've been in the 20s really every year because the Seahawks have been, realistically in the playoffs almost every year. So, and even when they weren't, they just missed. So it's not necessarily like they've had, the opportunity to have a super high pick, or they had traded their pick away and then, it worked out for somebody else. But I think that there is a really good shot that they're going to use that 5th pick, because when you look at the couple of times that Schneider has had a either top 10 or top 5, because he had a top 5 in Green Bay as well, he did use those picks. So it is one of those scenarios where it's a little bit uncharted for them to have this opportunity. But when you're looking at top 10 talent, you don't find those guys outside of the top 10 typically. Like, those guys are absolutely ready to go. Now, you may get a guy that's later in the draft that becomes awesome, but they're not usually awesome day one. And so those top 10 guys, they're usually just plug them in your team and they're going to be able to function. They'll make mistakes, right? The rookies, they're going to get used to the way the NFL moves and everything. So it's not that they're going to walk in and be an all-pro or anything, but they are able to just step in, be effective on that stage at that level. You draft that guy, you don't think twice about it. You just put him on the field and you're ready to go. Whereas once you get kind of late in the first round and really through the rest of the rounds, even if you find a diamond in the rough along the way where, you see a guy that through the right coaching becomes what could have been a top 10 prospect. They weren't when you got them, right? So you have to coach them up, which is great. They cost less, whatever. So those are good scenarios. And really, it's a good scenario for the player as well, because although their rookie contract may not be as much, there's no, after the first round, there's no 5th-year option that they can be picked up. So if you do have that, real growth over that first season, you are closer to a payday than had you gone in the first round. So, but all of that to say, I think that they probably will use that 5th pick. I think they actually probably use both of their first round picks this year, just because at 20, I think there's still going to be some really good defensive line talent on the board. And so because of how bad the defensive front of that Hawks was this last year, I think they will absolutely use both those picks, which is very rare. I'm so used to seeing the Seahawks trade back and, sometimes not even end up with a first round. They just end up with, 2 or 3 second and third round, picks from it. But this time around, I think they actually used both number 1 picks, or, both first round picks, I should say. And I do think that they are probably going to end up drafting a quarterback with the first one and some defensive line talent with that second one. Day 2 will be very interesting to see what it is they want to do with those second round picks, because they might try and trade back and pick up some later round picks from one of those second rounders. So, and again, mostly just because, like I said a little bit earlier, they're really up against the cap at this point. So the further down the draft board you go, the cheaper the guys become. And if they are looking at a guy that's maybe a late 3rd, early 4th, and they can pick up a couple extra, later picks from one of their second round picks, that does alleviate some of the pressure against that cap, because again, those other guys are cheaper to pick up. So there's a real shot that they end up trading down from, or out of a couple of those second round spots. But I don't know. We'll see. This is actually going to be a really exciting draft, just because I feel like there's more needs, and because of how active they've been in free agency, there's a real feel of they want to win now. Now, obviously, some of that is because Pete and Schneider, both of their contracts come up in 2025. So they don't have a long rebuild opportunity ahead of them. They need their team to be good immediately, especially because I don't know that Pete Carroll is going to, come back after 2025, right? Because I think he'd be 72, 73, something like that. And Schneider had, ahead of his last contract, had some interest in potentially going to another team. So I feel like their run as a duo is coming to an end. And if they're going to do anything, it's really this year and next year. So that makes me think they're really just pushing the chips in. They're going to do everything they can in free agency, which again is weird to watch because they're historically not real active. So all these signings are huge. And then they're going to go in with 2 first-round picks to add talent. I think they use them all, and I think they are really pushing to not win our division, but they want to go get a ring. And, they only got a couple years left to do it because, again, I think the band breaks up at that 2025 mark. So, yeah. So that's all the questions I had for today. Just a shorter Hawk Talk segment this week, but good to be back in front of you guys. Be sure, if you are either watching on my channel or on Let's Talk Sports, and of course, this will get uploaded to Hardcore Sports as well this week on tomorrow on Saturday. So if you're watching on any of those, be sure you like, subscribe, and absolutely check out some of the other shows that are on the networks. There's some awesome stuff, regardless of the fan base that you are. And honestly, even if you, what other sports that you like, Let's Talk Sports has a ton of different material on it. Lots of great guys. So definitely go check them out. And other than that, I will see you guys later today on Let's Talk Sports. Have a good one, guys.